Are you looking for all the answers about how to have a perfect marriage, how to be a perfect parent, and how to have the life that you always dreamed of? Well, then this probably isn't the podcast for you. I'm Angela, a mom of 8, and I convinced my husband to join me and co-host this podcast. We are going to talk about all things related to parenting, marriage, faith, and finances, and just have some real, raw, unfiltered conversations about all of those things. So grab your coffee, pop your earbuds in, and let's go. That you're just here to look pretty.
I'm just glad that we both established that I really carry the weight
that
when it comes to the looks department in this relationship.
Today we're going to be talking about the Magic Castle. And if y'all are like me, when Christopher first said, "Let me tell you about the Magic Castle," I was like, what in the hell is he talking about? Like, well, I wanted to know, but I was also like, okay, sure, babe. What's this weirdness you're going to... Okay, so Christopher's going to tell us about the Magic Castle.
Let me just start by saying I really like it that you're calling me Christopher right now.
Oh, would you prefer that I call you CR?
No, with you wearing headphones right now, calling me Christopher is really doing it for me.
Oh,
but
that's
I
nice.
digress.
Wait, let me get my glasses. Okay, go ahead.
Oh, Lordy.
I got the glasses. Go. Magic Castle.
So before I get started, let me ask you to just close your eyes real quick.
Okay, my eyes are closed.
Right. When I say we're going to take a trip to the Magic Castle, talk me through some of the things you're envisioning right now. What does this
I
place
think
look
we're
like?
going to Disneyland or Disney World. I mean, I've never been to Disneyland. Disney World. That's where I feel like we're going.
So it's magical. It's majestic.
Yeah.
Right? The Magic Castle we're going to talk about is none of those things.
Can I open my eyes before you tell me about it?
Sure.
Great.
All right. What if I told you the Magic Castle was a real place in Los Angeles? It's a hotel. It was built in 1950.
Okay.
All right. But it was first built as an apartment complex. So imagine a 1950s apartment complex. All right. It's painted bright yellow. All right. Basically, it's a motel in today's...
Skeezy.
You enter from the outside. Let's just put it that way.
Oh, and Christopher, what do we know about Angie and hotels where you enter from the outside?
That's a no-go.
Right.
That's a no-fly zone.
No-fly zone in this house.
Exactly. So the decor at the Magic Castle is nothing to write home about. All right. The courtyard, the pool, all the things that you would think about when it comes to hotel or search for, the little images that you scroll through, the Magic Castle does not jump out at you.
The amenities are not impressive.
Correct. I mean, it doesn't hold a candle to the Ritz-Carlton or...
the Beverly Hills Hotel?
Yep, you got it. When I first heard this story, which was probably about 2 or 3 years ago now, at that point in time, TripAdvisor had the Magic Castle ranked as the number 2 hotel in all of Los Angeles. You've got to ask yourself...
Right, why?
What the heck is this place doing? Well, it actually looks like the way my dad used to decorate. Right, just mustard yellows and baby poop greens. So you've got to ask yourself, what the heck's going on here? What the Magic Castle did that is not done by most businesses today is the value of experiences over things. Mm-hmm. Okay, if you were to let's just say we booked a trip at the Magic Castle and we were going to go hang out by the pool with the kids. Right, what you don't know is that poolside, there is a cherry red phone that hangs on the wall. You pick up that phone, and on the other end of that line, somebody answers and says, "Popsicle Hotline, how can we serve you?"
Popsicle Hotline?
Popsicle Hotline. They offer cherry, orange, grape, ice creams. I mean, you name it, they will bring it out to you on a silver platter with white gloves on, almost butler style, poolside.
I have pulled up the information on this Magic Castle, and it says the rooms may lack flash, but the Magic Castle's service is exceptional. It's warm, attentive, personable, and unpretentious. From nightly turndowns with mints to poolside popsicles to birthday cake from Susina Bakery, delivered on the guest's birthday. They refuse to accept a tip when they help with luggage. Basically, it's the little things that stand out. Ask and you shall receive.
Bingo. Right. So this 1950s converted apartment building in one of the most luxurious cities in the world has somehow grown a reputation as one of the best places to stay because of things like a popsicle hotline and
Yes,
service.
it says it's less than a 5-minute walk to Hollywood Boulevard.
Unbelievable.
That's incredible. Okay, so what's our lesson to learn here about the Magic Castle? That's what we want to talk about now, is how we can create a magic castle within our own lives and families.
This is something I use pretty regularly on Instagram as a hashtag. I want to create a movement around it because I think it's just so powerful once you kind of harness the idea around creating peak moments. This is important, and I want to say the reason I think it's important is because it ties into something that I heard a long time ago called the reminiscence bump.
Okay, I have no idea what that is.
All right, sorry. So a long time ago, well, not too long ago, actually, within the last 10 or 15 years, there was a study that was done. I can't remember it for the life of me who did it, but they surveyed thousands of people, and they asked them to recall the moments in their life that stood out the most, literally the greatest moments of their life. And what they found was, regardless of age, you could have been 85 years old, you could have been 50, 30, whatever the case may be, that the data showed that there was a very short period of life where people drew from these memories, right? So age like 15 to 35.
Okay.
It was your first kiss. It was your first job, when you got married, when you had kids, you bought your first house,
Yeah,
right?
my first kiss was terrible, but go on.
So you see where I'm going with this, though,
Yes.
is the transformational moments are the ones that stick out. Those peak moments, those moments of elevation, right?
Okay.
That usually required some type of either transformation or change. And so I think this is what the Magic Castle recognizes, is when people go home from their vacation, right? 3 months later, they're sitting at the dinner table. It's Thanksgiving. They've got all of their family around, and they're talking about, what's happened last year. What story do you think they tell about the Magic Castle? Do you think they say, yeah, we stayed at this gosh awful hotel.
Crappy
Yeah, this
hotel.
crappy hotel that the decor was just meh, but no, they're telling the story about that one time they had an orange popsicle brought to them by somebody wearing white gloves and was carrying a silver platter, right? And then they go, oh, are you serious? Like, tell me more.
Right.
And so they've built their reputation off of creating these peak moments. These types of memories, they're going to last a lifetime, right? So from a business standpoint, you can see how applicable that is, but what do we do in real life? How can you and I, in raising our kids, create those types of peak moments to where not only we value it and remember it, but our kids look back and say, you know what, I remember that time. But that's not just it, right? We want to widen that scope. For you and I especially, I'm thinking we're 36, right?
Hey.
You're turning.
You're 36.
That's right.
I am not.
How do-
Easy there, my friend.
How
Easy.
do we make sure that when we're 85 years old, that the best moments of our life aren't from this small window of time? They're not from age 15 till now, right? When we're 40, what are we going to change? What are we going to transform? What can we do that's absolutely going to be one of those peak moments that we hang on to?
Yeah.
So that's the takeaway for me when I hear kind of the Magic Castle story. But how about you?
Well, I feel it's similar, very, very similar. I feel like for me, it's just, I've learned in my adulthood the value of experiences and how much more those mean to me than any, tangible item in my life. And I think I even, somehow I just inherently knew that as a child too, though as children, it's a little bit harder to recognize that just because, culturally and society, like what's going on in society keeps you a little more focused on the tangible things of life and a little less focused on the broader picture. But in hindsight, I can see that the memories that stick out to me the most were experiences. And so for me as a mom, that's what I want to create for my kids. And when I think back to the things that we've done as a family, even just in the last couple of years, but truly since you and I got married, it's never the things, it's always the places we went, and the different things we experienced together, either for the first time or, I think they say like as a parent, you get to experience things twice, once through your eyes and again through your child's eyes.
That's good.
And that's so true. I mean, I've been to Disney before, but it wasn't nearly as magical for me to go to Disney as a kid as it was for me to watch my own kids go to Disney.
Good point.
And so I think it's kind of mutually beneficial, right? We're giving our kids experiences, but we're also selfishly getting to witness them have those experiences. So that's kind of what CR and I wanted to chat about a little bit today, is why we prioritize and value experiences, and sort of, what some of our favorite have been so far. But I think that's a good segue, because I wanted to ask you, this is something that I don't know that we've ever just sat down and had like a pointed conversation about, but like, what are some of your favorite childhood memories? I'll give you a second to think about it, and I'll tell you a couple of mine. Okay. Because to me, these drive home the point that experiences matter so much more. It's funny because when I think back to, being a young child, what I remember the most was that we would go for these drives. Like, my parents didn't have a lot of money for us to go and do things. And so they would just, on the weekends, it would be go get in the car on Saturday morning. Like, everybody load up and get in the car. And if you'd ask my dad, where are we going? Where are we going, Dad? He'd always say the same thing: to see a man about a dog. And he
still says that today.
He does. I only fell for that one time. And it was heartbreaking when I realized that was not, in fact, what we were doing. And I will also note that I did this to my own children a number of years ago, and they cried the entire way home because we were not, in fact, seeing a man about a dog. So don't try that one.
Note to self.
Don't know why my parents did that. And then I attempted it myself, and it was a big failure. So I'm sure, I know that my dad's not the only one who says that. But anyways, so we would load up in the car and we would just go drive around. Sometimes we might have like gone through like a McDonald's drive-through or something. But most of the time it really was just like driving through the countryside, driving up to, a lot of this was when we lived in Portland. So it was like an hour to the mountains, an hour to the beach. And we would just drive around. And of course, my parents were listening to whatever. My dad was probably listening to like Hank Williams Jr. or something. But my sister and I would just like look out the window and daydream, because I got car sick, so I couldn't read or do anything else in the car. So I would just look out the window and daydream and use my imagination. But that was something that, obviously, that cost zero money. I went home with nothing tangible from it. But I have very vivid memories of our drives. And then as I got older, those memories started to look like things like, I remember some of my favorite memories were playing softball with my dad, playing softball in the church league. That was something that we would do multiple times a week, was go to these softball games. And then if you were to ask my sister, Ashley, I bet you she would tell you the same thing. If you said, what was our most memorable Christmas? We would probably both tell you that it was the Christmas that my parents said, let's just do a couple of presents, nothing major, and let's go to the beach for Christmas. And we were like, okay. I think Ash and I were probably like 15 and 16 maybe at the time. And we literally threw a few presents in the back of the car and drove to the beach and stayed at this little house that my parents rented. And it was so much fun. We just laid around and drank coffee and ate and watched movies, and it was so much fun. It was one of my very favorite Christmases, and we just got a handful of presents. I don't even remember what any of them were. Not one. But I remember the beach house. I remember being there. I remember the movie that I watched that we rented.
Isn't that weird?
I watched Aaron Brockovich, which is still one of my favorite movies, but that was the first time I'd seen it. And yeah, I mean, so those are the kind of things that stick out for me as a kid, were the different places that we went, and sort of time that we spent together. And obviously some of it cost money, but some of it didn't.
Right. And what's cool about that too is, just listening to you, I haven't heard about that beach story before. That's pretty awesome. But it's like the reason, in my opinion, I guess the reason it probably jumps out for you was the variety, right? It's like you didn't see this thing coming. It wasn't planned. It wasn't anticipated. It was actually completely counter that. Right. And they always say variety is the spice of life. It's not something that you feast on. You're not going to sit there and eat a plate of oregano. Right. But certain dishes, if you add that extra spice in there, it kicks it up a notch. And that's what makes that meal memorable, or that vacation memorable. It's pretty cool.
All right. So what about for you? What are your...
So I would say one of my fondest childhood memories is we used to go to this place in California called the Kern River. right?
The
And it was
Kern?
Kern River,
Okay.
Kern, and it was our family and several of my teammates, baseball teammates' families, and some relatives and stuff. And we'd all go out there for like a week and camp and just have a jolly old time. But I remember catching my very first fish out there with my dad. It was like his personal mission. This whole trip, I caught like a 6-inch crappie. It was just nothing. I mean, you could have thrown it in a fish tank, for crying out loud. It was just so small.
A
But
crepe?
a crappie. I did whitewater rafting there for the first time. I remember. I don't know why I remember this. It's so weird, but we were a bunch.
Because it was a near-death
No, no,
experience.
not the next thing I'm transitioning
Oh.
to. There was, I would always, so our campsite was always right on the river. And on the
Yeah.
other side of the bank, imagine this 50 or 60-foot rock wall. And I would always stand on our side of the campsite. I'd find a stick that was about the size of a bat, and I'd go down by the river and I would pick up rocks and just hit rocks over the river against this wall for like an hour. I would whittle my own bat, for crying out loud, and just come up with like,
Can I whittle wood with you,
really.
sir?
And so I remember doing this, and still like I'm gripping my hands right now because I can still feel myself kind of holding the bat and
How old
things
were
like
you?
that. I mean, I was probably 8, 9, 10,
Yeah.
somewhere in that range. And I remember listening to Boston with my dad. That was one of his favorite
Yes.
bands. And so things like that, right? It's like I go back to those memories where, I don't know, that was the first time I probably really appreciated how much effort my dad put into creating good experiences for me as a kid. And so, yeah, I grew pretty fond of him.
Well, and to be honest, it's really no surprise that that's how we both feel. There's actually legitimate science to back up this idea that experiences matter more than presents or things. I know that there's a lot of people, especially around Christmas, that start talking about experiences over things. So I'm going to share with you just a little bit of scientific evidence to support
Educate me.
our feelings that way. So this is from ScienceDaily.com, and it's research by Cindy Chan, who's an assistant professor in U of T Scarborough's Department of Management. And she found that experiential gifts are more effective than material gifts at improving relationships from the recipient's perspective. And she was quoted as saying, an experiential gift elicits a strong emotional response when a recipient consumes it. Like the fear and awe of a safari adventure, the excitement of a rock concert, or the calmness of a spa, and is more intensely emotional than a material possession. And when I read that and I thought about it, I thought, gosh, that's so true. It's not just about the emotional response that we have to the experience, but it's about the connections we're creating with the person that we're experiencing it with. And I think that's why, like I said, I mean, you and I can go and do things together, and we love doing things together, but we also love doing things with our kids because we believe that it forges tighter bonds with our kids. And ultimately, as parents, I think, you know, you and I both agree that what we want is good, healthy relationships with our kids.
Yeah.
We want them to feel like they can always come to us, that they can trust us. And so taking these opportunities to do scary things together, to do new things together, it only serves to sort of make those bonds tighter and make those relationships better.
Yeah. You're in essence, you're taking risks together as a family, right? That's what adventures do. You're kind of venturing into the unknown as a family unit versus doing it solo. And it's not easy. I don't think it's something that is, it's not necessarily innate for most people, right?
Yeah.
Not everybody is a risk taker. Not
Well,
everybody.
and some people are just introverts by nature. So the idea of going out and doing things is way too people-y for them.
True.
I mean, I definitely go through my moments because I am an introverted extrovert. So I go through my moments where I'm like, listen, that's too people-y and I would just rather stay home. I definitely see the value, obviously, in figuring out a way and making it happen. And I'm not nearly as brave as I was before I had kids either. Motherhood makes you like a giant wuss because all you can think of is, you know, I mean, before I had kids, I went bungee jumping. I mean, I did all kinds of things that like Angie now would be like, girl, you crazy, sit down. Like, we're not doing that. But before I had kids, I was like more than happy to do it and excited to do it.
I think part of this too, part of something we haven't spoken to yet, which is there's a cost associated with transition or risk taking, right? And the cost is stability. This is something that I struggled with. I still struggle with it. Is anytime you're transitioning to something brand new, you're sacrificing something that you're used to. You're sacrificing comfort, right? I'm not saying that in order to have a fulfilled life, you need to have multiple marriages, right? Like I would never transition.
Well, that's good to know.
You know what I'm saying? Like, yes, I remember our marriage and the day we got married like it was yesterday. That doesn't mean I want to go out and recreate that or do that again. That doesn't mean that everybody should quit their job today and go start a new career. That's not for everybody. But what I think the moral of this, just kind of the underlying understanding of the Magic Castle or elevating peak moments or creating peak moments, is I want our listeners to feel empowered in being able to conjure up their own peak moments with their life, whatever that might look like, small or big. You have the ability to make something memorable today. You just have to choose to do it. And something that comes to mind was something that you conjured up a couple of weeks ago.
You're making me sound like a witch
with
with all my
homeschool, or with your giant cauldron. You're over there brewing up these great
a
ideas.
Baby's toe.
And I had a blast. I didn't even see it coming, but it goes to show you that I think this is going to be, when you tell the story, this will be something that I know our kids will look back on and say, oh yeah, I remember that.
Well, yeah. So I have, because you guys know, and we'll talk about this in a little bit, some of the more grandiose adventures that we've done with our kids over the last year, especially as we traveled and stuff. But one of the things that I found was that once you're home and you're in the mundane of life, it can be hard to figure out how to make those special moments in the humdrum of everyday life, in the hustle and bustle and hurry of just getting things done, right? Chores, work, homeschool. It feels like, well, how can I create these peak moments, as it were, or, these memories just in the holy mundane, as I like to call it, the everyday tasks that are just, serving your family and taking care of them. How can I create those moments? And so I've really started trying to think outside the box, and that's led to a couple of really fun things just in the last month alone that cost very little, but we're so effective in creating memories. One of those was adding in poetry tea time, which is not my idea. This was the brainchild of Julie Bogart. She's the author of, she writes the Brave Writer curriculum, and she wrote a book called The Brave Learner. So that's where this idea comes from. But basically, it's helping to make poetry exciting for kids. And so what I did was I grabbed some old quilts, pulled out a tea set, made some, sweet tea and a plate of brownies. And then I hopped on Amazon and ordered a $7 top hat and like a $3 monocle.
And you rocked my
and then,
I went sport jacket.
I went to your closet and stole your black corduroy sport coat. And I got everything set up and I called the kids in and I played some Beethoven in the background and brought them in for, the Braniff Poets Society, and had them all come sit down. And, they were just cracking up, of course, at their mom with the top hat and monocle and all of that.
You looked like a sexy Mr. Planter's peanut. I mean, it was fabulous.
What we decided to do was rotate who wears the hat and monocle each week. The kids will rotate. It won't always be me. But the idea
I thought you were
was
talking
that
about us. I'm like, wait a second.
But the idea is that, it makes reading poetry fun because it adds an extra element. And we've added in other things besides poetry. But the idea is that it's just creating memories. I really don't think my kids will forget that time that they came in the schoolroom and mom was wearing a top hat and monocle. No. And then last week, I knew that I wanted to find another activity that brought us together as a family, that allowed us to do something together, but that wasn't too terribly expensive. And so I ran off to Hobby Lobby and found canvases that were, I think it was a 5-pack for $10. Grabbed those canvases and came home and said, okay, everybody spread out. We're going to do some watercolor. And we listened to an audiobook, the Penderwicks, and just turned on an audiobook, and everybody just sort of sat in their place and worked on their own painting. It could be whatever they wanted it to be. And we all just took, what was it, an hour, maybe an hour and a half, as a family to just sit down and enjoy each other's company and listen to a book and paint. And that's not something that's like super over the top, but I know it was memorable for the kids mostly because you and I were both present.
Yeah.
And I think that's the thing is my kids color and paint and draw all the time. But having mom and dad sit down and do it too was an added element that I want them when they're older and they pull out these old memories. I want them to go, gosh, remember how we used to sit and paint with mom and dad and listen to books, or you know what I mean? So it's like in today's world that's so filled with electronics and social media and all of these things, I'm desperately like almost like scratching at trying to carve out a way to have these sort of old school feelings and memories with my kids, things that I have with my own parents and that I know my parents have with their parents and grandparents. And it's like you have to fight for it though these days because between all the different options for kids and what they're watching on TV and watching on YouTube and playing on a tablet or phone, it's like you have to fight for your kids' attention. And so for me, it's just, I don't know, it's like this thing got lit inside of me that was like, I have to find a way to create these memories in our everyday because we can't jump in our RV and go swim with manatees or take an airboat out with crocodiles. Like we can't do that every day or every week, but how can we make memories at home right where we are?
I think you said it. Variety. I mean, it was unexpected. I mean, you didn't, normally our kids are very, they're used to routines, right? That's how we function in our house. We have to with 8 kids, is we've got routines coming out of the wazoo. When mom comes downstairs and she's carrying a bunch of canvases and paint, and all of a sudden the receptors go up, it's like, what's going on? I didn't expect this, right? And it's an enjoyable 90 minutes that they didn't see coming. Those are what they're going to draw on, and they're going to remember that peaceful time, even though it cost virtually nothing, which was nice. Your painting was way better than mine, by the way.
It was not.
I'm pretty sure you had that planned for at least a week and a half.
Stop it. No, I didn't. I literally painted something and then painted over it and then painted again and then painted over it some more. I just kept painting over it until I figured out something that I halfway liked. But that being said, I feel like, if you've watched our YouTube channel, then you know that this last year, 2019, at the beginning of the year, we went on this RV trip and we packed a lot into that trip. And that was fun. And we created a ton of really incredible memories. Like I said, we went and swam with manatees, which was terrifying and amazing all at the same time. It's like this giant potato that floats underneath you. And even though they're like peaceful creatures and they won't hurt you, I don't know how you felt, but like I couldn't help but feel like a tinge of fear because I'm like, well, what if I got the crazy one that like goes bananas and turns around and tries to bite me? Do they have teeth? I'm sure they have teeth. Yeah, so swimming with the manatees, that was fun. And also, see, it's all the fun things that also scare me. The Devil's Den, that also scared me.
Risk.
Yeah, you loved it. And I was like, there's a shark going to come up out of here.
Kennedy Space Center, Devil's Den was fantastic. The airboat tour. I mean, honestly, 2019 was probably one of the best years of my life personally, which I didn't see coming. But a lot of that had to do with the variety or the transformation. I mean, yeah, we go back, take it 6 months before that, right? I mean, I left my job of 13 years to come home.
Yeah, that's a whole other episode.
Right, it's a whole other episode. But again, it's like it's spurred on, this snowball of firsts and transformations and kind of new roles, just a bunch of variety. And so and we're still going through it even today. We're on a podcast. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. So all these things don't happen unless you kind of take that leap of faith. And
do you remember going to the cabin in the mountains in Gatlinburg?
Yeah.
That was one that to me was like an experience that sticks out, but I can't really pinpoint why. It wasn't any one significant thing. We went so I could finish my book. And I did not finish, but we went so I could add words, basically. Like I needed to get my word count up. I had a lot of work to do. And so we went there thinking that, if we could get out of our regular routine, that would help. And I don't even really remember anything specific, but that trip felt extra special to me. And I just remember loving our time there.
I think there's something that's hidden there too. When we were even picking out the hotel, or the Airbnb, we picked out like this crazy Airbnb that had like a TP inside of it. It had like 80s arcade games. That's why I remember it. I was like,
Yeah.
this is not a conventional house.
Yeah, we looked
It's
for
not
weird.
It's not a log cabin. We wanted something that was going to be memorable. There was a
Yeah.
canoe hanging over
That's
the
true.
dining room table.
I think we
Right?
subconsciously
Exactly.
knew that we wanted that's the kind of stuff that we need to create memories.
Exactly.
Even though we didn't realize that's what we were doing. Yeah, that's a good point. I didn't really think about that. You know, well, the other thing that I find really interesting is that I had read an article recently talking about how millennials are much more likely. I want to say it was 70 or 85% of millennials say that they care about experiences more than things. And by things, they're not just talking about like, oh, hey, I'll skip out on the Louis Vuitton purse so that I can travel to Bora Bora. It's like being able to buy a house, a certain, kind of car, a certain, like a sports car or something like that. Tech gadgets and those things that are really popular items.
They're getting married later. They're having kids later in life or not at all.
Right. For the opportunity to travel and experience things.
Yeah.
Now, Cornell University actually did a 20-year study.
Whoa.
Yeah. I mean, that's a long time to stick with something. My Enneagram 7 self couldn't stick with something for 20 years to study it. But, of generations prior, that was the thing that everyone cared about was you get married, you get a good job, and then you buy a home. You buy an even bigger home. You have really nice cars. That was sort of previous generations, where their sort of value structure lied.
The American dream.
Right, the quote unquote American dream. But this 20-year study done at Cornell showed that investing in experiences over things is far more important to people. And they through this study proved what they called adaptation isn't happiness. I'm going to butcher this guy's name, but the Cornell professor's name is Dr. Gilovich. And he said, one of the enemies of happiness is adaptation. We buy things to make us happy and we succeed, but only for a while. New things are exciting to us at first, but then we adapt to them. And it's kind of like, this is going to be a little off topic, but it's kind of like lifestyle inflation, I think is really what he's speaking to, is that you get the new iPhone, it puts a smile on your face for a minute, or you go on a big shopping spree, but then the novelty of that fades and you're sort of back to, okay, but now there's a new iPhone. I want something even better. And then the second thing he learned was that we're a sum of our experiences. And he was quoted as saying, our experiences are a bigger part of ourselves than our material goods. You can really like your material stuff. You can even think that part of your identity is connected to those things. But nonetheless, they remain separate from you. In contrast, your experiences really are a part of you. We are the sum total of our experiences.
That is profound.
Don't you find it fascinating that some of the people that you are most attracted to in terms of spending time with and wanting to talk to are people who have interesting life experiences and are storytellers, and they want to tell you about them.
Yeah.
People who've seen things, been places, met people, and they're willing and wanting to share. I think we're all naturally drawn to those because so many of us are afraid to live that life. We're afraid to be that bold. We just stay in our little fencing of like, this is how life is supposed to be. This is what we check the boxes, right? And we're drawn to people who push back against that, who are like, screw this, like, get me out of this fencing. I'm out of here. And they've gone and experienced things and seen things. And they come back with all these stories to tell. And we're naturally drawn to that.
Shoot, there's a handful of YouTubers that I follow that I have zero in common with. But I'm like, what they're doing with their life is amazing, right? They're traveling all over the place, seeing these amazing things. I definitely think there's something to what you're talking about, the kind of that natural gravity to people that are living
because it becomes you, like he says, that we're the sum of our experiences. And so it begins to be like this puzzle piece of who you are, which in some cases I think can make you, I don't want to say a more interesting person, because that makes it seem like, well, if you can't travel or do things that you're not an interesting person. But I think that being able to acknowledge that and recognize that and be able to pull out those experiences within the everyday and recount them for people, I think is what makes that interesting, like a storyteller kind of person, right? It doesn't have to be someone that's traveled all over the world. It's just someone that's able to pull out the interesting within the mundane.
Sure.
Okay, so then the third thing that he found was that invest in purpose and passions, not possessions, which I feel like very much kind of goes along with what we've already talked about. And the fourth thing was the anticipation of uncertainty. And he was quoted as saying, in reality, we remember experiences long afterward, while we soon become used to our possessions. At the same time, we also enjoy the anticipation of having an experience more than the anticipation of owning a possession.
Mm-hmm.
So that's interesting to note. Memories and stories only get better over time, and you cherish those experiences from the moment you start planning them to the second it's over. I think of people who really enjoy wedding planning. That was not us. I literally called my mom and said, can you just plan it? And I'll just like, what do you want me to do? And she was like, just show up. That's it. I showed up. We showed up for our wedding. My mother planned everything because I just didn't care. And then the last thing is possessions don't connect us. So we consume experiences directly with other people. And after they're gone, they're part of the stories that we tell to one another. And so experiences are a social thing, which makes them worth more to
valuable.
Us. Yeah,
like
than
my
an
dad,
object.
I remember at the Kern River. I mean, that's one of the moments I shared with my dad. That's why it was so important.
Right. Driving with my parents, going to the beach with my parents, and my sister, Ashley. That was at a sort of tumultuous time in our relationship where we weren't really getting along, but you plucked us from our everyday teenage squabbles and put us in this beach house together. And I remember it had like a second floor where it was kind of like its own little apartment. So we had a coffee pot and stuff up there, and we just brewed pots of coffee and played games and watched movies. And I don't think we fought one single time, when normally at home, like we were at each other's throats at that age.
That's cool.
What I fear we might be in danger of in this conversation, though, is making people think that what we're saying is you need to go swim with manatees and travel and spend time in other cultures and stuff like that. I know we talked about some of those sort of mundane things, but I wanted to take a minute and give some really tangible ideas of ways that you can create these memories and experiences with your kiddos without it being something that requires you to travel around and
quit your job, buy an RV,
right.
sell your house.
Right, exactly. So I found this list, and it's actually from Motherly. So I believe it's motherly.com is the website. Any websites or studies or anything like that we discuss in these episodes will always be linked in the show notes for reference. So this will be linked there if you want these ideas. But some of the things that they listed in here are things like going to a children's theater, zoo memberships, trips to the bookstore to pick out new books. I would also add trips to the library. I have vivid memories of going with my mom to the library.
I don't.
You didn't go to the library a lot. It shows. No, I'm just kidding. Local and national state park passes. I mean, what's one of our favorite things to do? We always say we're going hiking. I mean, it's rarely actually hiking. It's usually just for a walk in the woods, but it sounds better when you say we're going hiking.
Glamping.
Yeah. Toss a backpack on, throw some fruit snacks in it, and away we go. Art museums, a cooking class for kids, pottery making classes. Who suggested out of country airfare on this? But that feels a little pricey. A musical instrument and lessons. Lord, just don't let it be the recorder, just not the recorder.
3 blind mice.
Flower or herb seeds to plant a garden. Do you remember when I grew that one tiny little sadly carrot out there?
We vlogged that. Yeah, it was about the size of half of my pinky.
It was the world's smallest carrot, and it was pretty depressing.
But we remembered it.
Well, that's true. We remember the sad little carrot, and of course, volunteering.
It's so cool.
That I would argue is probably one of the best ones. Ways that you can give back to your community with your children.
Probably one of the best. I mean, I remember not too long ago, Kennedy and I did just a meal packing ordeal at church, and like the image of her weighing out rice in a scale is just ingrained on my head, pun intended there. I won't forget it. And so
do you remember delivering Thanksgiving
yes, I do, with
dinners?
The girls.
Yeah, no, we had Noah too for 1 year. First we did it with just the girls, and then we did it with Noah, and then we had too many kids where we would basically go pick up these meals and drive them around to homebound elderly folks in our community. So you just knock on the door and deliver the food and wish them a happy Thanksgiving. When we only had a few kids, that was easier. The more you have, it's like, okay, unload the bus, now I'll load the bus, now unload the bus, now I'll load the bus. But you can always go, work on the line of that and stuff. But there's so many opportunities to give back, and I I would agree. That's probably arguably the best way to spend your time together, and experiences you surely will not forget.
I will agree with you. I think the biggest takeaway is ensuring that those listening understand that they are not simply the passive recipients of these types of moments. They have the ability to conjure up these moments and keep the variety, keep the spice of life going.
You can create them.
That's right.
You can create them if you have a lot of money and a lot of flexibility. You can create some pretty incredible ones. If you're a little short on cash, and you can absolutely create some incredible memories that don't require you to take out a second mortgage. So the thing is, though, is taking responsibility for that decision to create memories and now looking for opportunities. I think it's sometimes easy to fall into the trap of thinking, well, I don't have a lot of money, or I don't have, this ability or that, way to do this thing or make that thing happen.
Be intentional.
But yeah, it's all about intentionality, especially with kids, and the ways that you can look for in your everyday to create those magic castle moments within your own family, in your everyday, in your mundane. You can easily create those magic castle moments when you're going on vacation and traveling and doing fun things, but looking for the opportunities to create your own little magic castle within the walls of your own home.
When you're 80 years old, you can thank the Magic Castle for drawing on those peak moments that you created when you were 67 winning bingo tournaments.
Listen, I'm going to kick some butt at bingo. Ash and I have already discussed it. That's what we're going to do when you and Pete pass away, because statistically speaking, y'all will die before us.
Highly probable.
So Ash and I are just going to ride around with our blue hair and play bingo. I'm all about that life. All right, well, let's wrap this up. Thank you all so much for tuning in. We're so excited that you're here. Don't forget to head over to iTunes, Apple Podcasts, anywhere that you're listening, Spotify, all the different places that it's possible to listen. But leave us a review. Leave us a 5-star review, because you like us, and it would hurt our feelings if you didn't. And why would you want to do that to us? So leave us a 5-star review. The reviews help us so much. All of these platforms look at that to see if people are actually enjoying the podcasts. We need your help, You got anything else to end with, babe?
No, you look good in headphones.
Thanks. You're not going to comment on my glasses?
I like those too.
Okay. All right, y'all. That's it for today's episode. Thank you so much for tuning in and spending some of your precious time with us. We'll catch you guys next time.